Hello everyone, my name is PJ, and welcome back to the Void in another episode of The Hoarder. In the last episode, the heroes warded off a horde of orcs that were attacking Overleaf, only for them to suddenly turn tail and head west, in search of something that they claimed was no longer in Overleaf. Now, the heroes had the elves go through everybody in Overleaf to ask if anybody was missing anything. Nobody said anything about anything being stolen or lost. The only thing that had recently left the village of Overleaf were the men in blue, who, if you recall, the goblin among those men in blue said that they had just come from Overleaf, so they were there. Now, the heroes had also decided that they were going to join the elves of Overleaf in their raid on the Skullcrusher lair, to take advantage of the orcs' absence. They marched north for the entire day. By the time nightfall hits, they're too tired to continue trekking into Skullcrusher territory. That would be a bad idea. So they wait the entire next day. And during that time, elven scouts and such are infiltrating the territory in secret, setting up illusions and ambush spots right under the orcs' noses. When the time comes for the heroes to go in, they do so, and the entire way, all the way up until the entrance of the Skullcrusher caves, they don't see a single sign of life. Not the elves, not the orcs, not any animals, nothing. When they reach the entrance of the caves, they see a whole bunch of orcs, a couple dozen orcs guarding the entrance. And when the heroes arrive, that's when the elves spring their ambush. They fell several orcs in one volley of arrows, and then Eldrenthal comes out riding on a white horse, goading the orcs into following him. Ha ha! Corellin shall take your god's other eye someday. And that pisses off the orcs so much that they abandon their posts and follow him, all except for 5 orcs whose job it was to maintain their position no matter what. And if there's one emotion that orcs feel that is greater than their hatred for elves, it's their fear and respect for Grumsh. So with 5 orcs remaining, the heroes use the cover of darkness in order to fire arrows and spells at the rope holding up the sign that's directly above the cave entrance, marking it as the entrance to the Skullcrusher's lair. They knock it down, and it conks 3 of the orcs in the head and knocks 2 of them prone. The orcs get up from this little mishap and begin charging the heroes. Balthazar throws a javelin as one of them is charging him, causing him to fly up into the air off of his feet and fall down onto his back dead. As the orcs surround the heroes, they keep peppering them with spells and weapon attacks until they are all felled. The coast to the entrance of the cave is now completely clear, and in the distance they can hear arrows being fired and people screaming in agony. Not just orcs, but elves too. So the heroes head on their way. They enter the caves. They decide not to light any torches and to just go in blind, with the 2 dark vision characters, Serge and Zaymot, in the lead. Eventually they reach the first real chamber of the cave, the ambush portal, which they had been warned about in advance by Eldrenthal. In front of them is a huge pair of double doors, each 20 feet wide and 20 feet tall. Looking up to their right, they can see the ambush cave that they were warned about, a tunnel up in the wall that is covered up by a heavy tarp painted to look like the surrounding stone, just like the one that they saw in the goblin caves. What they weren't told about, however, and something that Zaymot notices with his stone cutting, is the strange rock formation in a tunnel to their left. They spend some time examining it, and when I tell Zaymot to roll investigation, I tell him to do so with advantage, thanks to his stone cutting. Now, Zaymot only has a +1 bonus to his investigation, so he would need to roll at least a 19 in order he rolls a nat 20. This is going to be the start of a lovely recurring theme in today's session. So he rolls the nat 20 and he finds out that the rock wall at the end of this tunnel is fake. Or rather, it can be pushed in and slid to the side, like a door. As soon as he opens it, A voice emerges from inside the cave beyond, screaming, "Ah! Die, orc!" and a club swings out. Zaymot manages to block it with his shield and tries to tell whoever is beyond, and he speaks in Dwarvish when he says this. "Wait, don't, it's me. I'm here to save you." He could tell that this was a dwarf. So he raises his shield and he sees the dwarf slave dressed in rags holding a club. And he sees him. He's like, "Zaymot? Is that you?" It was one of the hill dwarves from Rivercrest. Going inside, they find a whole bunch of slaves waiting by the entryway with clubs prepared. They were ready and paranoid of orcs finding out that they had created this secret exit that they were going to escape through. Luckily, the heroes found it before the orcs did. Among the slaves' number are several dwarves, male and female, and a few humans, all of whom are male. But none among the slaves here today were Zaymot's father, Borin. He asked about Borin, and the slaves all give each other these weird looks, saying that Velzol, the Skull Crusher chiefess, took Borin with her just a couple days ago, and they haven't seen him since. So the party has a new objective. They have to find Velzol. Before they head off and send the slaves on their way, because the coast is clear, they tell them to go out and look for the elves, and the elves will carry them to safety. One of the slaves tells Zaymot that Borin left a gift for him. He had been hiding it from the orcs all this time. He goes and he looks under some rocks over where he's instructed to, and he finds a holy symbol of Bahamut that looks exactly like the one he already has. He's confused, but he puts it on anyway. Chit is the only one who suggested it might be magical, but they don't investigate it any further than that. So they continue to the other entrance of the slave den, the correct one, the one that's not the secret door. And they are confronted by the guardian of the slave dens, a trained cave bear, which almost kills Balthazar. It knocks him to 0 in just a few hits, probably because he wasn't raging. He can only do that so many times per day, and he was saving it. Nevertheless, the heroes still manage to defeat the cave bear and go through a few potions of healing, and then they are on their way once more. Once they are out of the slave dens, they come to a large open room, and inside, Zaymot sees 4 orcs, one of whom is one of those female long-clawed orcs, like the priestess that they'd fought before. Another was a regular adult orc, and the other 2 were children. All of the players immediately start, don't want children involved, so they do everything in their power to avoid getting said children involved. They make their presence known. They don't rush in or ambush them. They claim they come in peace, that all they want is to find Zaymot's father, Borin, and to meet with Velzol. The orc is by himself, because the orc claw of Luthik is busy, guarding the children. He doesn't want any part of this. He knows that he can't take them, and he also believes that if he sends the heroes in Velzol's direction, she will kill them. He has that much faith in her. So he tells them exactly how they can find Velzol. He tells them exactly what directions to take to avoid all other encounters with orcs. I kid you not, the heroes took the shortest possible route, through sheer luck and also through their decisions, to the boss chamber. I had this whole friggin' dungeon planned out. So they found the secret door. They parlayed with the one orc that would actually be willing to parlay with them because he's trying to protect children. And the heroes go straight to Velzol's chamber. When they get there, Velzol has Zaymot's father in chains. There's a thick gold collar wrapped around his neck, barely able to keep him breathing, and it's connected by a golden chain all the way to the head of her axe, which is this enormous great axe made mostly of sharpened bone and held together with dried flesh, also painted gold. As for Velzo herself, she is an incredibly mature-looking and strong female orc wearing an owlbear skull on her head as a helmet and wearing a long cape made of owlbear fur, which is both fur and feathers, white in color. She's also wearing chainmail, but that's just because of the stat block. She looks at the party for a brief moment before seeing Balthazar. Their eyes lock, and he realizes that Velzo looks like an older version of both Grucka and Shemdine. He immediately knows that she's their mother. Velzo announces that she has absolutely no interest in keeping Borin captive. She doesn't care about him, and she doesn't care about Zaymot. All she cares about is Balthazar. She raises her great axe into the air and says, "Balthazar Kimbatul, if you have any honor whatsoever, you will either lay down and die for your transgressions, or send me to join my daughters in Acheron." And I tell the party to roll for initiative. Balthazar rolls a nat 20 and goes first. Balthazar takes a step forward and readies a great axe attack for as soon as Velzo comes within range. And when her turn comes up, come within range she does. Balthazar doesn't do all that much damage, but Velzo does. Not only do Orc War Chiefs get 2 attacks with their great axe, but they have a trait that just flat out adds 1d8 damage to all of their weapon attacks. And she crits with one of them. She deals 40 damage with 1 attack, which Balthazar is raging, so that gets cut in half to 20. He only has 30 hit points. First round of combat, and the tankiest member of the party is already 2/3 down. So the party begins, their usual tactics. Zaymot healing, Surge casting his chromatic orb spells and whatever else he can do. He almost paralyzes himself with a wild magic surge, but he manages to overcome it. At one point in the fight, Surge used a fire elemental chromatic orb that didn't deal any damage to her because Surge didn't roll high enough. Not low enough to miss, but not high enough to deal damage either. But it lit her cape on fire, and there were burning feathers flying through the air like a tornado. Chit gets this great idea, where he goes around the room, sneaks up behind her, and uses Disarming Strike in order to knock the great axe out of her hands. When she drops it, Balthazar's turn comes up. Instead of attacking, he throws his own great axe into a fire pit so that no one else can get it, and then picks up Velzo's dropped great axe, which means she no longer has a usable great axe. She is severely weakened now because all she has to fight with is a backup spear, which isn't quite as strong as her great axe. But she keeps fighting, and with Zaymot's healing and Balthazar's resistance and the +2 temporary hit points that he can give himself every turn, he manages to survive with only a few hit points by the time he lands the killing blow on her. But as Balthazar beheaded her, he shouts, "I'll see you in hell!" And after she collapses onto the ground, Borin, weak and prone on the dirt floor, lifts his finger and says, "I think you mean Acheron." So after that, Balthazar uses the last few moments of his rage in order to go over and break the golden collar off of Zaymot's father's neck. Borin is a curmudgeonly fellow who is not all that pleased to see Zaymot. He's more annoyed that it took him so long, and even more so annoyed that he never actually attuned to the special holy symbol that he left behind for him. That acts as a magic item. You have to attune to it, and it gives you a +1 bonus to spell attack rolls and your save DC, which he begins doing, and he's going to do this during a short rest while everyone else goes around the room collecting treasure. They solve a puzzle to get into a small chamber that is full of gold coins, and while the party is counting those, I roll for random encounters. And something from the north enters the room.